There are many names in the gaming industry nowadays. Most of them will be forgotten, either next month or next year, and some will never be spoken aloud. And then there are also names that will be remembered forever, to be whispered in awe. A few of these names may be Richard Garriott, Roberta Williams, Sid Meier, or also Leroy Jenkins. But one name is definitely on that list: Lowe. Lowe created adventure classics like Leisure Suit Larry and Freddy Farkas, worked as a programmer on other gaming pearls, legendary titles like Police Quest and King's Quest, and also played the sax with the David Hasselhoff Big Band. He taught children how to read musical notes and runs a website on which he shares his wisdom about computer games, information technology, and jokes. Mostly jokes, actually. He also agreed to an interview with Top Hats and Champagne. This is the interview. That's actually one of the questions I prepared, how your relationship to LucasArts or Lucasfilm back then was, because you two were the big dogs on the market, basically. There was no other. And did you have relations? Did you talk to each other?
I'll disagree with you. There were others back then. They just aren't. They didn't live.
Yeah.
You know, there were other people doing good games. But you know, you just Lucas ended up being big, and as did Sierra. But no, it was a much. Let's see. I guess it was competitive in the sense that I wanted to do the best I possibly could because you know, I wanted to be proud of it when compared with them, and but it was also very friendly because we knew each other. We were on speaking terms. You know, there was no rivalry other than, you know, we wanted to swap games with them. When they brought out a game, you know, they would mail us copies so we could play it, and when we put out a game, we would always send them free copies. And I think that was the reason a lot of us got into the industry back then, was because software was $40, $50, $60 a pop for those little tiny games, you know. And when somebody said, well, if you work for us, you get free software, it's like, wow, that's great.
Right. So you did have good relations then, and
I thought so, yeah. I always thought it was one of a competitive rivalry, but it was, you know, it was more like brothers than it was enemies. It was, you know, like you are towards your sibling. It was sibling rivalry. I guess that's the,
right.
Yeah.
And I just imagine, how would a crossover look between Guybrush Threepwood and Larry Leffer? Now that's something to consider.
Well, I think one of the reasons those games were memorable and that we're still talking about them 25 years later, well, maybe almost 30 now, is because the games had personality.
Indeed,
and because they were small enough teams, and the publishers were smart enough to allow us to let our personalities show through. There was no corporate interference. There was no corporate leveling of the field, which is what you kind of get today. Let me put it this way: if you know Police Quest, then you know Jim Walls. If you know Larry, well, you know me, because they allowed us to make our games personable. And if you know Space Quest, I mean, Scott Murphy is one of the funniest human beings alive, and you know, I smile just thinking about those games, and that's because, you know, Scott was allowed to be Scott, and I don't think you see a hell of a lot of that anymore in games. Although you do see it more in the smaller games, in the, you know, mobile games and that market, but the big corporate entities, you know, it's really tough to get that sense. There are a few. I mean, you can still find some great stuff, but you don't see the personality of the designers flaming through like you did on our game. I mean, you know, the look and feel of King's Quest and Police Quest and Space Quest and Larry all were pretty much exactly the same because we were using that same engine. But the actual games themselves didn't feel at all like the same.
Yeah, yes, it was story driven. It was still text driven also. Even though it was a graphical game, it was very much text driven. And I guess you wrote the lines yourself then for Larry, and the other guys wrote the lines for their games, or did you have texters for those things?
No.
I don't think so.
No. When I started out, I did graphics and music and writing and design and programming and everything else. And then I quickly realized I was horrible at drawing and graphics, and that we got rid of that quickly. Got somebody who could do that better. But then we still did everything else, and then. Even in the mid 80s, it was still a designer programmer. I think Roberta never programmed, but she was just a designer. Yeah. But the designers always wrote the games. So all that writing that you see in there is from the guys who were designing the games and often coding as well.
And talking about the experience of these games back then, last year, yes, it was last year, Leisure Suit Larry Reloaded was released, which was basically a 1-to-1 copy of the earlier original, and
no, it was a 1-to-4 copy,
right?
Because the one was in there, all the original stuff was in there, but we added a lot.
That's true.
More.
I'm sorry, that's definitely true, of course. And do you think that you captured the feeling of this old game, or did you not even try to do it and do something different, but in the same setting? What was your
No. The whole idea behind the Kickstarter project was that we had 15,000 people who said they wanted to see something like the old games, and that was our mission. They were our publisher, basically. They were our bosses, and so we actually set up forums and interacted a lot with the people who pledged, the backers was the word I was looking for. We set up the conversations with the backers, and they said that they wanted a game like the old days, and so that's what we gave them. We gave them Larry, but I couldn't stand to just do a 1-to-1, and that's why I interrupted you when you said that.
I'm very sorry for that.
No, that's all right. But I actually used that phrase. I actually said, if we're just going to do a 1-to-1 copy, well, then I'm not going to be involved because you don't need me. You can do that just by copying the game. And that was not at all what we wanted. What we wanted was to improve it, to expand it, to improve the graphics and the animation and so forth. And I think that we came out well that way. But our emphasis was to give our backers what they wanted, which seemed to be a look back, but with a better view. It's like a better view of the old game. So, in describing that, so if you want to play Leisure Suit Larry Reloaded, it's an obscenely inexpensive product. It's so cheap, I just can't believe,
I caught me on code.
It's not worth stealing. It's so cheap. But if you want to play the game, you will find that everything you know about how to solve Larry Land of the Lounge Lizards won't work for you. Some things are the same, but many things are different. I fixed some of the problems that I hated for 25 years. There were things that just bugged the hell out of me that I should have changed when I did the original game, but
I didn't. That?
Give the
fuck in the alley.
Well, no, that was fun. I always go for the laugh. But give the drunk in the back room a glass of whiskey. He gives you a remote control. That didn't make any sense. So that we fixed that puzzle, and some of the other ones we added help for the thing with the pills on the windowsill was always just a real hanging, so to speak, a real hanging point for players because they it was obvious early on that there was something there you needed, but you didn't have anything, and there were no clues to help you out. So we really put together a lot of clues and strengthened that description and helped the player a lot. At least I think we did. Yeah. And there were just a lot of places like that. Plus, because we raised more money than we I started to say than we needed, but of course what we didn't. We raised more than we originally thought we needed, yes. Which was not nearly enough to produce the whole game. Stupidly, we asked for 500,000. We ended up getting over 700,000, and the game cost.
The horror.
And then we spent $1 million producing the game. So yeah, it's hard to make money like that. But fortunately, the company Replay had other income from other products, and then I think the game eventually has paid for itself and made money a little bit, not much, but it's been successful. And more than that, I think it was artistically successful, which was the reason I was there. I never believed that it was going to make the Apple top 10 page, but by the same token, I thought it was fun to go back and look at that game with a fresh eye, to give it beautiful high definition, actually Retina definition. I think we went with 2600 pixels across, which you got to remember, when we did the game originally for the PC, I believe there were 320 pixels by 200.
Yes, indeed.
So, that's about like this watch,
yeah.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And a new generation of gamers were introduced to Larry. They're just something I like, because nowadays don't get to play all these old gems because they aren't in the media. None of these, not the Microprose games, not the Sierra games, any of these old companies. And these remakes are like exactly because of this reason. New gamers, younger gamers, get the chance to play what we like to play back in the 80s or 90s, and that's a great thing.
Yeah, and I think that I agree, and I believe that the how can I say this? The state-of-the-art graphics back then are so crude today that people are turned off by it. Just as there are hundreds of thousands of wonderful movies that are in black and white, and you can't get somebody young to look at them.
Exactly.
Once you start appreciating black and white films, a whole world will open up to you that you didn't know existed. Well, it's the same way with these games. I mean, once you accept 8-bit graphics and just go for the story and for the characters and the dialogue and so forth, a whole new world will open up to you, and you won't miss the fact that the character's ankle doesn't bend exactly right to fit the surface that he's walking on. But who gives a shit about that? Yeah. I mean, nobody cares about that stuff in the long run. I mean, the graphic designers and the animators, get off on making Call of Duty even more realistic and more blades of grass that are waving back and forth, and it's like, okay, you look at that for 2 seconds, and then what's there to do? What's the story? What are we doing here? And that's where the old games excelled. I think because there wasn't those great graphics, we had to make up for that and keep you interested with other things.
Yeah, and I think also while graphics improved, of course, the AI almost didn't sometimes. I think that sometimes. Back in the days, like for example, Microprose, like I said earlier, also did quite some nice games back then. Yeah. They had working AI. There was this tank game they did, for example. I don't remember. I think it was Brian Reynolds, was his name?
Could be. Yeah,
right. The tanks would shoot back at you and they would maneuver. Basically the same thing the enemies do nowadays, and nothing has increased in the capacity of these things, only graphics. And I also think, well, for me personally, one problem is that most or almost all publishers seem to cater to the it's a hard word, the casual crowd nowadays, and they want to make everything very easy, very accessible. Your grandmother needs to play this game, and your infant and everybody needs to play these games. And I think this is also a reason why the games are lacking in character nowadays, because it's instant gratification.